Good afternoon, dear parents and families of HES Academies and our beautiful community. Welcome to another family engagement broadcast. And with us is Hala Mallah from Access, Public Health Coordinator and Access Community Health and Research Center. Today's presentation is about parenting and adolescent, setting limits and boundaries with your child. Without further ado, here's Hala.
Thank you, Isam, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here today to listen to this topic about setting limits and also how to set boundaries with your child, especially when they're going through adolescence. And it might be a confusing time for parents and then as well as for the child themselves. So with these tips, with some information, this should really guide you in having different conversations and then also knowing what to talk about and then how to help them through any kinds of situations that might come up. Because again, it might be a lot of unpredictable things that happen, but having something to fall back on, something to look to, can really help prepare you for most of the things that might come their way. And so adolescence is the ages from 10 years old to 19 years old. And this is especially when the child is transitioning from childhood to adulthood. And so again, the teenage years and everything that comes with it is going to lead to a lot of different changes for the child. So physical, mental, and especially social. So this is going to be them trying to find their place in the world, in school, and then trying to develop their own personality and the things that they enjoy, and trying to find some sort of sense of belonging with whatever whatever place in life that they're at. And so these are also going to be very important years in their development and how they're going to view themselves when they get older. And it's also going to affect what type of adult they become. How do they handle difficulties in adulthood, the kinds of careers that they get, and how do they handle these situations when they are there as well. And they can also face a lot of lifelong effects from what they experience in adolescence. So trying to maximize the protective factors during adolescence. So anything that's going to really protect them against any danger, any dangerous situations or unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy situations is really what it's all about. And then trying to minimize the risk factors. So those types of experiences, those types of things in their lives that might make them more vulnerable to any kind of unhealthy, risky behavior, dangerous situations. And we know that, we can't really protect them from every possible thing that could happen, or else they might find themselves living in this type of fear. So it's really important to just try to maximize as many protective factors. And then if something does come up, which it will, that may put them at some sort of risk, it's good to be able to know how to handle those situations afterwards. So that way we're minimizing the effects of that situation, trying to minimize the harms. So what I like to say also is, not to have this perspective of only trying to avoid any kinds of situations, but knowing that situations could arise and they will arise, but knowing how to handle the aftermath of it. So that way the effects aren't long lasting and the harms aren't long lasting as well. And so that's what we're going to look into, how you can have these conversations, and then also how can you minimize those risk factors afterwards. And so parents, it's nothing new, but they can face struggles when they're trying to raise their teenager. Many parents might say, I don't know how to talk to them, or, they're not talking to me. They really just want to be left alone, or we're always having disagreements. We're always fighting, so to say. And that's something that can happen, especially if the parent and then the adolescent, the teen, the child aren't really on the same page. This time, teenagers are trying to form their own form of independence, trying to feel like they're growing up, and then starting to separate a bit from everything that they have done when they were a child. When they're a child, they're very close to the parents. Most of the time, they're listening to everything the parent says. And then as a teenager, they're now trying to form that sense of independence, trying to show, I can do this on my own. Although they might definitely need some guidance since they're very new to a lot of different things. Being a teenager is especially when there's always a new situation that they're facing every day. There's going to be something new they have to handle, a new situation they've never been in before. And that's because they're transitioning from being a child to an adult. And so more responsibility is placed and more opportunities are also there. So again, they're trying to maybe navigate these situations on their own. And then that, in a sense, starts to make them separate a bit from the parent. But the parent might mistake this as them not wanting to talk to the parent, and then the parent feeling like, they're just not listening to me. I can't control them or anything like that. So, really clarifying that this is most likely what's happening. They're just trying to figure things out for themselves. They're more likely to also gravitate towards their peers, those that are their ages, and rather than turning to an adult right away. And so, understanding that, and that's okay, that's going to happen, but that doesn't mean that we still, as parents, can't have these conversations and still can't be there to help them. It's like knowing what situations, what moments in the day you can use to speak with them, and then really maximizing that conversation, making sure we're saying the right things and really trying to help them as much as possible. And so, again, during adolescence, they are influenced by their peers very much during this time. And the risk comes here is that if their peers or the friends that they spend most of their time with aren't a good influence on them, so they're not really trying to uplift them, they're not trying to support them, they're usually friends who are trying to put them down or put them in situations that can harm them. So, risky situations, they put them down. They're not really supportive of them. They're not someone who is a healthy friend for them to be around. But if they do have those good friends, those healthy friends, that's really good to keep that up, to encourage them to spend more time with those friends and try to be around those friends that they can really learn from, can really feel supported from. And that way they're better influenced because they're going to be influenced either way. But it's really good to make sure that the friends they're being influenced by have their best interest in mind, and also knowing that your child can be a good influence for their peers and their friends as well. So teaching them the importance of, being careful of who your friends are and how to really choose a friend. How can they start thinking about the kinds of friends they have? If someone's mistreating them constantly, to let them know that's not okay and they need to look for friends who actually care for them, because someone who might mistreat them might not be a friend after all for them. So they might just be unaware of that. They might feel like they don't have any other friends, but to let them know that is a possibility to always make a new friend, and be very selective about what types of people you really want to spend a lot of your time with. So having those conversations, and again, if you feel like they have friends who might not be too healthy for them, who really bring them down, having those conversations and letting them know that they should choose this decision on their own and to really care about themselves enough to have friends that are better for them and who are more supportive of them. Because again, during adolescence, the brain development is still incomplete. So the part of the brain that is responsible for thinking decisions through, for really being logical and planning your steps ahead of time before acting, is developing, but the reward center of the brain is developing before that during the teenage years. So the teens are more likely then to go towards behaviors that feel good, that are exciting, that are risky, rather than really sitting there and thinking about all their decisions all the time. So it doesn't mean that they're not thinking at all about their decisions, that they're not planning ahead, because they are, but they're more likely to be trying to take more risks or do impulsive kinds of behaviors rather than just sitting and thinking things through. So if they need some more time to really sit and think their decisions through, to think about their friendships and their behaviors, that's kind of where parents can come in and help with that. So also understanding if your child, if your adolescent is, not thinking things through sometimes, or they make mistakes, that's completely normal. This is definitely going to happen a lot during these years. And to allow them that space to learn from their mistakes, to give them advice that can help them next time, or really giving them those kinds of experiences that you've had, and then giving them that information in that kind of manner. So if they do make a mistake, educating them about it, letting them know how they should do something else the next time, or how they should avoid that kind of behavior, or they should handle things differently next time. But not to really make them feel as if, that mistake makes them a bad person, and, you know, putting a lot of pressure on them, because then they're less likely to really turn to the parent to get that advice next time, or to get help the next time they make a mistake. So normalizing that it's going to happen, they're going to make some mistakes, but parents, we're here to help them, we're here to support them, and we're here to have those conversations to guide them through it. And so, this thoughtful, positive parenting, everything I described, having those conversations, being there to give them guidance during these times is really what's needed. So, that thoughtful, positive parenting, trying to promote a strong bond with the child, a strong relationship with them. And this really is going to be the biggest protective factor for the teenagers, especially when it comes to taking part in high risk behaviors later on in life. And as parents, this is all about really trying to look at what does the child need, and how can I care for them? What can I do to really improve their overall well-being and to really help them through this time? And parents are here to respond to the child's needs, to care for them, to spend time with them, and to really try to establish that bond with them and to make sure they remain close with each other. So being able to the child's able to then turn to the parent, get the help that they need, and the parent can also turn to the child as well, and really support each other in those kinds of ways. And so these are some different ways that are listed here of, how can parents use different parenting styles to really try to form that relationship, that bond with the child, and then also how to really teach them and, allow them to be independent adults, because that's what they're looking for. They want that sense of independence, but how can a parent help them do that? And so understanding that they're seeking the sense of independence, they're trying to be more responsible. And so parents can give them more responsibility slowly, in whatever form it might be, whether it starts with something around the house or something with school, maybe signing them up for something after school. So that way they have this sense of responsibility and the sense of needing to hold themselves accountable for everything that they have going on in their lives. So, in that sense, parents can slowly start to let the child feel this sense of independence as they get older, and that way the child takes that on for themselves. So, as an adult, they're more likely to be more responsible, more independent, but able to turn for help when needed. So, that starts with the parents being there to help them out when needed, and then having that healthy balance of responsibility, independence, but parents are always here to help support when needed. And that also is a key point for this, is respecting them as much as possible, to listen to them whenever they speak. So if they are going through something, if they're speaking about something, really being there to listen to them, to listen to what they have to say, their experiences, and everything that's going on. So that way they're able to better cope with anything that's happening, and better able to really think things through for themselves. So the parent is there to respect the child, listen to them, and not to really invalidate their own experiences and their own needs as well. So if a child, teenager, turns to the parent, tells them about something that's going on, for the parent to not dismiss it right away, not to say no, or that's not true, that's not what's happening. Because whatever the child is going through, they really find it important to turn to the parent, and they're just trying to learn how to navigate this situation. Because parents have had a lot of experiences, they've been around for a lot longer, and so they might know how to handle a certain situation. But to know that, for parents, they were a child at one point, and so a lot of experiences were new to them as well. So kind of putting your mind in that situation as a parent, thinking back to when you were an adolescent, how were things for you? And then how would you have wished an adult would have helped you out, or a parent or someone could have helped you and guide you through these years to make things easier for you? And so that's kind of what we can keep in mind as parents navigating these years and helping children out as well. And also with this work, it really does, as a parent, really helps to raise a child's self esteem, especially when parents avoid criticizing them too much or having unrealistic expectations on the child. So, in order to really increase those protective factors, like I mentioned earlier, we must be able to increase a child's self esteem and help them form their self image to make sure their self image is a positive one. So, with self esteem, it's overall how the child feels about themselves, how the teen feels about themselves, and their place in the world, and then also how they just really think they can handle the things that go on in their lives. So, if they have a high self esteem, a positive self image, then they're more likely speaking about themselves, thinking about themselves in a way that's supportive, in a way that uplifts them, rather than tearing themselves down or discouraging themselves. So, with that high self esteem, with that positive self image, they're more likely to set goals, to achieve them, to take risks in life that are healthy and beneficial for them, and they're more likely to really achieve a lot more. So with school, with work, and anything that they set their mind to, they're more likely to really feel that overall sense of accomplishment and that sense of satisfaction with who they are. And that really starts, part of it starts in the home, having a parent or a caregiver who is really there to support the child, to contribute to that positive self talk. So if a parent avoids criticizing and bringing the child down, then the child will take on those words, will use that positive language to form a belief about who they are. But if a parent is criticizing the child, putting them down, then the child's really going to take all that negative talk inward and start to view themselves in that way. And so that's the last thing we want for a teen, especially because they're already going through a lot. It's a lot of uncertainty, and they really need to be on their own side and to really be there for themselves, or else they're not really going to have a smooth time going through their adolescence and trying to accomplish a lot more throughout their adulthood. And then also accepting our own limitations, being honest with ourselves. So for parents to make sure that they're honest with who they are, and then also accepting their own limitations, so that way they're not putting that on the child, on the adolescent. They're there to see the child in a more realistic way, because they know everyone has limitations, everyone might make a mistake. And so being honest with yourself, that's a good first step. So that way you're able to not be so harsh on the teenager, on the adolescent, when they do make a mistake. So that way they learn how to, again, be honest to themselves and then hold themselves accountable. And, there might also be a lot of things that are going on for parents. So there's work and other aspects of life. And a parent might not be able to really spend as much time with the child, with the adolescent, as they would like to. So really trying to look for that balance. I can't stress that enough. With a lot of things, we need to find a good balance to make sure it's not really all or nothing. And so having that balance where a parent is able to still care for their own selves, other responsibilities, other areas in their lives, but still making that time to be with the child in a quality kind of way. So it doesn't matter about how many hours you spend with the child, as long as it's really a quality kind of time. You're spending that close time, really speaking with them and supporting them as well. So, parent and child are not just distracted, not speaking to one another, that they're having that meaningful kind of interaction as well. And so there's always room for you to learn new methods. There's always room to grow. If one approach of trying to speak to your child didn't work this time, that's completely fine. We can definitely try to do some other approach moving forward as well. And these are the most important aspects of this parent and adolescent relationship. And it really is that sense of connection between the child, between the teenager, and the parent, and then having that close monitoring over the child without really over interfering. So, what this means is being aware of what your teenager, what your child's going through, what kinds of situations are happening, but not really being over involved and really like overbearing in a way. So you allow them that room to breathe, you allow them that room to make small mistakes, but you're still there to help them out. You're still there to give them advice, guidance when that is needed. So that way it's not completely ignoring the situations, and it's not completely ignoring their sense of independence and allowing them that room to really develop that responsibility for their own selves. And giving them that freedom to think independently, because that's a very important skill for them as they go into adulthood, as they go on through their lives. Because if a parent is over involved, again, there isn't that balance, then the child might become overly dependent on the parent or the caregiver to make decisions for them. So we, as parents might want to interfere right away if something is going on. A parent can't just sit back and let the child make a mistake because the parent is thinking, I know what to do, I can help their situation, I can let them avoid all these mistakes. And so the parent might just jump in right away without even speaking to the child about it. If a child gets into a fight with another friend, most of the time parents are right there ready to speak to the child, speak to the parents instantly without really asking the child what happened and what's going on. So having that conversation first, getting an understanding, and then allowing the teenager, the child, to make a decision with your help as well. So it doesn't mean you can't be involved at all, but again, having that balance and taking the steps to really handle it in a way that's effective. So that way you're still protecting your child, your adolescent, but you're also allowing them to learn how to handle things for themselves and how to navigate life for themselves moving forward. Because this can also be a large protective factor against future behavior. So, especially during the teenage years, if your teen finds themselves in a situation with peers and they might be pressured into doing some risky behaviors, by having that skill early on, the teenager is better able to make a healthy decision for themselves, make better choices for themselves on their own without really being overly dependent on someone else to make that decision for them. And these are some tips for that positive parenting I mentioned. So, making sure that the love that is being given to the adolescent isn't conditional. So, you want that unconditional love. And this means really being on their side no matter what, allowing your child, your adolescent, to know that you still love them no matter what. So even if they make a mistake, you're not going to stop loving them. And that way they don't really connect their mistakes to themselves, to who they are. And they don't feel that if they make a mistake, then they're unloved or they're unlovable. So that way the love isn't really tied to conditions because that can be a very large risk factor moving forward for them. So showing them that unconditional love, being on their side no matter what, if they have made a mistake, if they're wrong, letting them know about that and separating the mistake from who they are. So letting them know this is not okay. It's a bad thing to do, but you're not a bad person. So really separating that instead of saying you're bad for doing that, or you're always making mistakes. You don't really want to connect that to their identity because that again is going to be taken on as their own view of themselves, their own belief of themselves, and that's not really going to help them moving forward. And then also to avoid trying to bribe them to be better. So, if you do better in school, then you'll get this and that. You can really let them know it'd be great for you to do well in school for yourself. It's really good to focus on your learning, your grades. And then there's nothing wrong with giving them some form of a reward, but not really connecting that directly with a reward. So that way they kind of feel like everything they do has to be connected to something right away, that instant gratification, instant reward just for doing things that they should be doing on their own for themselves. So finding that balance again in those aspects. And then keeping a close watch is very important. Again, just because a parent isn't overly involved doesn't mean that they still can't keep a close watch. They still can't be aware of what their child is up to. So just being generally aware of their daily routine, what are they up to, what kinds of friends do they have, who their friends are. It's really good to at least know about their friends, to know who they are, what type of people they are. So that way you have an idea of what kinds of influences your child is being exposed to regularly. And then knowing where they spend most of their time, and having that communication open and kept with the parents of your adolescent's friends. So having some form of understanding of who this person is and who your child is really spending most of their time with. And it's also really effective to keep communication with the school, with teachers, just being regularly aware of what they're up to, how are they performing in school, really speaking with the teachers and attending those meetings, going to the school as often as possible whenever the opportunity is there, just to really know, how is your child performing and how are people viewing them as well, and what is going on. So that way we're better able to handle anything before it happens, or to really intervene early on, so that way the issue doesn't go too far. And this is also really connected with that importance of having discipline, of explaining the family rules, and to use these punishments in an appropriate amount. So with discipline, again, when you set those rules, you're not really going to sway back from the rules too often. You tell the child, this is what we expect, these are the rules that you should follow, and this is what will happen if you don't follow these rules. And again, if they break a rule, if it's an accident or a mistake, again, letting them understand the effects of these kinds of actions, the harms that could have happened to them, but not to really be inappropriately punishing them, like if it's not really matching the severity of the mistake. So if they make a small mistake, to give it a small amount of that punishment just to match whatever behavior was happening. And then to also follow that up with speaking and explaining as well. So that way they know what's going on. And a really great way is the authoritative parenting style. So this means where a parent is nurturing, is protecting, is understanding, and also supports the child, but is still firm with the limits. So not being a permissive parent where if a child breaks a rule, or limits are constantly being broken, and they're not being respected, that's a different kind of format to really follow. But authoritative is one of the best parenting styles there could be, and it's really helpful to use this approach when setting rules, setting limits, but also explaining that to them, what happens if they break a rule. And you listen to the child's viewpoint. If they explain to you, this is unfair, this is not something I like, you can understand their viewpoint, listen to them, but you don't always have to accept it. So that way they don't always feel I'm right, or my parent will always change their mind. That way they start to feel like they can get away with anything. So in this kind of way, a parent is setting rules, is having a good balance with the amount of rules, the amount of support as well, and they're listening to the child. So they're not completely shutting them down. They allow them to have and express a healthy amount of their own opinion, their own view, but they still are firm on their own rules and own limits. And so now we'll look into how do we set these boundaries? How do we set these limits? So we looked a bit about, the importance of doing this and also why this should be done. And so now we'll look at how this can happen and how it will play out, and all the effects that it can have. So empathy is very important, really feeling for them, knowing that we were all in that situation at one point, and knowing how difficult it can be to go through adolescence, especially transitioning from a child all the way to an adult, is a very difficult time, and they need a lot of guidance with this. So understanding them, understand where they're coming from, and to really avoid making those quick judgments whenever they make a mistake. And to know that how would you like to be treated if you had made a mistake, instead of just being really punished right away, or not heard or not listened to. It would be really nice to want to be heard, listened to, supported, but then also explain to you that these are mistakes, these are the rules, and being firm on those kinds of things. So that way the child really starts to feel like they want to make these decisions for their own selves, rather than I have to do this just because. So they start to understand the reason behind certain behaviors and doing certain things. That way they'll be motivated on their own to do this, instead of looking for that reward externally. And then also maintaining the teen's privacy. You can keep a watch on them, but also allow them to have their own space. So It'll be better for your child, your adolescent, to feel like they have a safe space and they can tell you things when they've made mistakes. They can turn to you for help. And then that way they're not really so afraid to mess up that they just keep it a safety or a secret from you. Because that can really be a safety issue if a child is making some sort of mistake, is taking part in behaviors that are risky, unhealthy behaviors for them, potentially life threatening behaviors. And just because they're so afraid to turn to their parent, they might keep it a secret. And then we know we can't help a child if we don't know what's going on, if they don't turn to us. So that way, when they try to keep it a secret, they end up really never getting the help that they need. And then eventually, when the truth comes out, it's often too late, unfortunately, to help them or to help them as best as possible. So it's really good to maintain that kind of relationship, to maintain their privacy with these balance, because we want them to turn to us. That way we can help them. Because if they don't turn to us, then, there's only so much we can do. And then also allowing for any natural consequences. So again, like what was mentioned earlier, if a child, a teenager makes a mistake, it might be very difficult for a parent to just sit back and watch everything play out. And then that's when we see a lot of parents right away try to intervene, try to really manage the situation on their own. And, as much as we want to do that, it's really good to take a step back and to allow things to play out. Again, using your best judgment, knowing when to step in, when it's needed. But until then, to really offer them support, offer them guidance without really taking over completely. So we're allowing the child to make their own choices and to learn these much needed skills. But again, if the situation seems like it's not getting any better and it feels like this is the point where I need to step in, then you're more than welcome to do so and help them out through these situations as well. And with that parenting style, the authoritative parenting style, it's important to be firm and consistent. So when you set rules, you let your child know what's okay and then what's not okay. And when you're firm on those rules and you're consistent with those rules, so if they break that rule again, you're going to be just as consistent. You're not going to, one day say, okay, you can do this, the next day, no. That way, they never really know what's to come next. So they have that consistency to fall back on. And then this really prevents them from trying to really push you over or try to take advantage of your own leniency or of the rules. That way they know I can't do this kind of thing because my parent set this rule. My parent says this is not okay, and I don't want to break that rule. And then also, when we establish that kind of relationship, that kind of connection with the child, they start to really think twice about their actions, because not only do they not want to break a rule, but they don't want to break your trust. They don't want to harm that relationship that they have with you. And so the relationship with you becomes very important to them. And if there isn't a strong relationship to begin with, then the child might think that's okay. If I harm this relationship with my parent, we really don't have one to begin with. So that's a really dangerous mindset to really get the adolescent in. So having that relationship that's strong, supportive, really allows the child to turn back to that and to know I have a lot to lose if I do break a rule, or if I purposely break the rules that my parents set for me. And again, you might not want to disappoint your teenager, but sometimes it's better to have a teenager who's disappointed in you because of a rule that they broke than to really lose respect for you. Because again, that respect is very difficult to gain back. But they'll get over it if they're disappointed. They'll stop feeling upset if you tell them they can't go somewhere when they really wanted to. Again, because that is your rule. So they know that you're consistent with the rule, and they'll get over that, but the respect for you will remain and will stay there. And then also keeping the bigger picture in mind, trying to remind yourself and your teenager of how, when things happen to them in life, when they go through a situation, that everything will resolve itself, everything will get better. If your teenager made a mistake, to know for your own self that it's not the end of the world. Things will blow over, you will get through this, and everything does pass with time. And what's more important is that they were able to learn something from this mistake they were able to learn something from the situation, and so were you as well. You were able to learn more about your adolescent. You were able to learn more about the connection, the relationship with them, and also more able to learn about how to handle these situations next time. So, in a way, both the parent and the child are able to learn a lot from these situations. So, not to be so afraid of making a mistake, to know that these can happen, but how can we handle them better? And then also, what might come from this? So, what benefit could happen from this kind of situation? And so, things will not always go the way the teenager wants them to. And as a parent, things aren't always going to go, as don't always go as planned. And if most of the time things always go unplanned than they do as you have planned them. So to know that these are completely okay, and this allows the child then, as an adult, to know that they can handle most things that come their way. And if they can't handle something, that's completely fine because things pass with time and they don't really connect to those mistakes or those situations with who they are as a person. So it really does begin, again, from when they're a child. Having this foundation formed is super important in allowing the child to grow into an adult who's overall healthy, with their well-being socially, physically, and mentally as well. And these small skills that we practice here really go a long way, and they're more important than we might think they are, because they might feel like little steps that we're taking, but they really make up the bigger picture overall. And also, when all else fails, to really just remember your own adolescent years. Remember what you went through as a teenager and the kinds of situations that you had to experience. And so, this allows you to have a bit more empathy, to feel for them, and to really understand anything that your teenager might be experiencing, and how to handle them as well. So, I know the world looks a lot different from when parents were adolescents themselves. But although the situations have changed in a way, the experiences are really similar. They really go through the same kinds of transitions in school, trying to think about what future career they want, what they want to do in college, what type of school to go to, the kinds of friends they want to be with. And those are really universal experiences that everyone really faces during these years. So although they have different things that they might be exposed to, or different situations, it's really all the same at its core, at its root. And it's really important to know those types of skills to be teaching them and the types of conversations to be having. And that way you can use your own experiences as a way to give them that guidance and that advice as well. And then also listening to them when they talk, allowing them that chance to express their ideas, their beliefs, and to correct anything and give them advice in a gentle kind of way. So, not completely dismissing them, and then not allowing their incorrect views to just, go on, to correct them when needed, again, with that good balance for them. And then also teaching them the importance of taking responsibility for their actions, forming that sense of independence, and then also about all the things that they might be experiencing in life. So, to let them know that these difficulties are going to show up, but it's completely okay. They'll know how to handle them. And then they also have that support they need if they were to, face these situations. And again, they will try to have these new experiences, they will make some mistakes, but allowing them, giving them the help to make those right decisions, and then also having that good communication is very important in doing all this. So it really comes down to the relationship, the trust, and then also the communication that goes on. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect. So it doesn't mean the teenager has to be perfect. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect at all. And being a good parent, there's going to be mistakes that are made. There's always more to learn, and that's completely okay. So parents might often feel worried, frustrated. They might feel angry at times. And to really be able to model that ability to apologize if a mistake has been made on your end. And that really does set a good example for your teen. So maybe you might handle a situation with your adolescent. When you look back at it, you kind of regret what you said or how you handled it. And that's okay to make that mistake. And you can really turn back to your child and let them know, this is not how I wanted to say that, or I shouldn't have done that. And that really does set a good example for your teenager to take accountability for their actions and to be able to apologize when they do mess up. And that also does help them to learn how to manage emotions and how to fix relationships as well, using the right social skills. And that is the end of the information of the presentation. And so if there are any questions at all about this, I am here to answer them.
Thank you, Hala, for this presentation, and thanks for everyone who is watching this. It's a very important topic of how to deal with our
Mhm. Sorry, I think your volume is cutting off. But thank you. I'm not sure if the audio still, it might be just on my end, it's kind of cutting off.
Not sure. What's the problem? Case, thank you again. Thanks for this presentation. And since the the next upcoming
HES Academies have been serving the Detroit metro area for over 23 years, promoting academic excellence, leadership, and cultural diversity, ranking as some of the top schools in the state of Michigan. Our pre-K through 12th grade students enjoy tuition-free, state-accredited education by STEM certified and highly qualified staff with no geographical restrictions. And with advanced placement, college dual enrollment,